especially over the last 2 years with the pandemic, and there's so many great things that when we work together on the municipal side and the provincial and federal, we get great things done, and he's been such an important role model and mentor. If there's a tough question, I'll pick up the phone and call Mayor Tory. He has a lot of experience, and I just appreciate his leadership. And he's the type of mayor that we can work with. We can work with everyone, but he's been an exceptional partner, and I'm very, very grateful. No matter if it's the largest subway expansion that the mayor played a critical role in, $30 billion investment, or even childcare as we're working through that, and especially the pandemic. He played an extremely important role with that as well. So, Mayor, I want to thank you, and I'm going to pass it over to Mayor Tory.
Well, Premier, thank you. I have a bit more to say in that I don't get a chance to have all these people very often in front of me. But first of all, I want to thank the Premier. Obviously, we talked about a number of things today, but it started with my congratulating, because I hadn't really seen him in person except at a Pride event since his re-election. And what we discussed in priority was we discussed intergovernmental finance related to COVID in particular, because we continue to have some stresses and strains that are COVID derived, and we've been working with the other governments, and I continue to believe very strongly that all three governments have to play a part in addressing some of those issues. I think that we are at a key moment in history now where what we have at the provincial level is a stable government that will be here for 4 years for a full term. We have an agreement in Ottawa that will have a government there for 3 years. And I think that if that opportunity presents itself, strong, stable provincial and federal governments working with the city can allow us both to overcome some of the challenges we face, but also to take advantage of the great opportunity that I think Toronto is today. We've seen during the pandemic, as the Premier referenced, that when we work together, and you had going on during the time of the pandemic 2 years, where there was no territoriality, there was no partisanship, there was simply a desire to cooperate to get the job done. And it worked. And we established, we meaning Toronto, Ontario, Canada, established a track record when it came to saving lives and when it came to vaccinating people and so on that ranked second to none in the world. And now the challenge is to do the same thing with regard to forging a recovery for the City of Toronto. But I'm not immodest in saying it's just a fact that if Toronto can have a strong recovery that leaves no one behind, that contributes to the strength of Ontario and Canada because of the predominant role that Toronto plays, obviously, in the economy of this province and of this country. Toronto's success is fundamental to the success of Ontario and of Canada, and so the things we discussed today, intergovernmental finance, housing, mental health, and a number of other things are things that are key to making the city successful, which I think in turn will make the province and the country successful. And I'm a proud Ontarian and a proud Canadian, and I carry out my job obviously with deference to what the people of the City of Toronto need, but at the same time obviously trying to make sure that can contribute to a stronger Ontario and to a stronger Canada. Il est nécessaire que tous les gouvernements travaillent ensemble sur le logement, sur la santé mentale et sur les autres priorités, l'économie, pour s'assurer que nous ayons une reprise forte qui ne laisse personne de côté. We can't leave anybody behind. These are challenging times. They're challenging times for the city, for the province, for the country, for the world. And I just think that if we work together, we can overcome many of those challenges. I was present at large parts of the Collision conference last week, and there were thousands of people here from all over the world, I think 120 countries. And if you heard them talk about Toronto and Ontario and Canada, you could be proud, and that was no reason for complacency. It was simply a reason to recognize the scale of the opportunity that we have in front of us if we can work together to deal with some of our challenges. And so I look forward to continuing my work with Premier Ford and with his government to make sure that we take advantage of those opportunities and address those challenges together, because we've proven when we work together collaboratively, as we did during the pandemic and as we've done on many other things, including transit, for example, that we can get a lot done. So thank you for listening.
Richard Southern with City News 680. We found out today that the average rental cost in the City of Toronto rose by the most in 3 years in May. What are you both doing today to help alleviate the soaring cost of housing? And Premier, when you hear that, do you think twice about bringing back rent control, sir?
Yeah, good question. We did have that discussion, and really what we need to do is really encourage the developers out there to build more rental units. I know we've built more rental units last year than we had in 30 years, but we have to continue the pace, and they're finding it challenging as well to build more rentals as we see interest rates are going up. What would also like to work on, not just rentals, but attainable ownership. And we're going to work collaboratively with the city and all municipalities, but also the federal government. What people want to be able to walk through their door, put their key in, and know they own, be it the condo or their bungalow or their home. So we're going to work hard on that. We're going to continue making sure that we speed up the timelines, that we can get shovels in the ground. Again, give the tools to the municipalities that they need. I think we had a good start with the task force. They put the recommendations out there, but there's work to be continued on that. And I'll pass it over to Mayor Tory.
Well, the one thing I know after 8 years in this job is that when it comes to housing and a bunch of other issues, but housing in particular, it is not going to happen if any one government's trying to do it alone. And so all three of us are going to have to work together. I think of how we've done supportive housing together, for example, and what you have there is the cities have put up the land, especially the City of Toronto I'm more familiar with. The federal government has put up the capital, and the province has paid for the operating costs for people to help with mental health issues and substance use issues and so on. And I think the same is going to have to apply to ensuring there's enough rental housing. We cannot afford to have a city in which people can't afford to live. That's morally and economically not a feasible strategy. We can't afford to have a city in which only people who are very comfortable or those who are struggling can live. There needs to be a room for people in the middle. I call it workforce housing, affordable rental and ownership housing. And the Premier and I talked today about a number of things we can do together with the federal government to make sure that we have an adequate supply, an increased supply of attainable housing for people who are working. They've got jobs, good jobs in many cases, but this is an expensive city, and we have to increase the supply of affordable housing, and I think we can do it. We've proven it with supportive housing. We can replicate a model like that for rental housing, but it's challenging.
Premier, first time we've had a chance to talk since your cabinet announcement on Friday. I know a few people were wondering about you appointing your nephew to be Minister of Multiculturalism.
Yes.
He has no experience at Queen's Park, and so is there nobody else in your cabinet that would better fill that role for Minister of Multiculturalism?
Well, Michael has extensive experience. He's been elected democratically 4 times now, 2 years as school trustee, 8 years as a city councillor, and then he just won the seat in York South-Weston that we haven't won in 71 years. And let me just point out about the multiculturalism side. Etobicoke North, as the mayor knows, is probably one of the most multicultural areas in the entire province. We've worked very, very closely. Not only Michael has over the last 10 years of his career, but myself and obviously my brother Rob. I think he'll do an extremely good job. He has a lot of knowledge, and he's been an elected official probably longer than more than 60% of our caucus, but who worked with him for quite some time, and he thinks the world of the mayor. I'll pass it over to the mayor on Michael as well.
Oh, I'd be happy to comment on that. You know, I can comment on something like this from 3 different perspectives that I think are all relevant. First of all, I have worked with premiers and prime ministers and know that the task of selecting a cabinet is complicated. It's not easy, and that you make the best choice you can in the best interest of your government. And so I'm familiar with how difficult it was for the premier to make all of the decisions he made. Secondly, I can speak to you as someone who understands the experience of having your name cause people to form stereotypical impressions about what you're capable of or what you're not capable of, or, why you might be where you are. And thirdly, and most importantly, I've worked with Michael Ford. I put Michael Ford on the police board, which is a very significant place of a significant responsibility. I placed him with council colleagues on the audit committee of the City of Toronto, and I can tell you, he is thoughtful, he is hardworking, he does understand his community as well as anybody else, and it is one of the most multicultural communities in all of Toronto, if not all of Canada, and he will work hard. And so, give him a chance. This environment we've got ourselves into, where the first thing that people want to go to is to try and be negative about people like that, give him a chance. And he'll be held to account by you and everybody else, the legislature, the people, but give him a chance.
like to hear from both gentlemen on housing again. The CMHC report says across Canada we need 3.5 million homes to bring affordability. That's above and beyond what's currently projected. 1.8 million of that in the Ontario, mostly Toronto area. What can you do in your respective jurisdictions to deal with that? And Premier, perhaps for you, specifically, if you could talk about dealing with municipalities like Hamilton or Ottawa or Durham that are saying no more land for development, or provincial regulations. And Mayor Tory, the city looking at increasing development charges by 49%, $45,000 on a single detached home, I think 18,000 on a one-bedroom condo. How does that help the situation, increasing development charges?
Well, thanks so much for that question, Brian. I think we know one of the main reasons it's supply, and in the process and standardization. I can tell you, being down at the city and also working with the mayor over the last few years, they're doing everything they can to speed up the process. The mayor understands it better than all of us, and we're going to work collaboratively again to standardize the process across the province. But if I compare Toronto on the process and timeframes versus other areas, they're doing very well. But we both know that we have to improve. As for the Ottawa, Hamilton, and I mentioned, Durham, well, something I got to tell the folks out there that everyone has to pitch in, and it can't have all the burden on Toronto and nothing on Ottawa and the old, not in my backyard, when they have endless, open land. The largest cost that we face as a province trying to get this done, or I should say the developers as well, is people call it the dirt, the land. I know Mayor Tory just mentioned it about putting the land forward. The province has property available, so does the federal government. So that's the first start, to make sure that we focus on building on that vacant property, every piece of property available. We should at least look at and investigate it and make sure it's feasible to build on. But we're going to have a very, very aggressive plan moving forward. But as the mayor said, we can't do it alone. The municipalities can't do it alone. So we have to work with the federal government, the province, and the city. And I'm confident if we can standardize the process, speed up the process, get shovels in the ground, supply some of the land, be it municipally or provincial or federal, we can really move forward. But let's make no mistake about it, Brian. There's challenges as we move forward. Again, you see the economy around the world, the interest rates are going up, inflation's going up. So it's going to be a challenge. Can we do it? Absolutely, we can do it. Can we speed the time frames up? 100% we can. But as soon as you take one piece of the puzzle out of that, be it the municipal or provincial or federal, that's where the problem is. But we've been working so well together, all of us, the municipalities and the feds and the province. So I'm very, very confident, and our teams have been working on it very closely as well. I'll pass it over to the mayor.
Well, just 3 points, if I may, Brian. First, CMHC, the authors of that report, and I agreed with a lot of what it said. They will have to be, really substantial partners in us achieving some of the very goals they set out. And I will tell you, from the standpoint of the City of Toronto, we are prepared to play a leading role in making sure those numbers are met. And the Premier set some very ambitious numbers for the province of Ontario, as we have for the city. But CMHC, the author of that very same report, has to be there with adequate funds, which are funds that will be returned to them. They're not funds that are being given out in grants, by and large. They're loans, because the interest rate situation and the construction cost situation has changed the financial dynamics of a lot of these projects. Secondly, I will say to you that we have a lot of work to do, and we are continuing to work at the process of making sure that the approval process is, more streamlined than it has been, because we have to be faster at this, because time is money, and every delay simply costs money, which gets passed through. The third point I want to make mention of, and I invite you to please go and look at the legislation. The legislation with respect to development charges requires the city, in imposing that charge, to have a specific list of infrastructure projects that will be paid for by those development charges. This is not to finance frills or to finance some, unidentified projects going forward. It's for the sewers. It's for the water. It's for the transit that is going to serve those very same developments. And I won't be the mayor of a city that makes the mistake that was made in previous generations, which is to build all the development and then maybe 10, 15, 20 years later. That's why we have a $28.5 billion transit program today, because we did not build the transit in previous decades. And the development charges pay for those. They get phased in over a period of time, and we've had extensive discussions with the development industry about that. But by law, all of those development charge monies, all of them go to pay for infrastructure that is necessary to make sure there are sewers, make sure there's water, to make sure there's transportation to be provided to the new residents of those buildings that are going to be built.
You just want to stay there, John? Again, both of you, how do you deal with councillors or caucus members who are part of the Not My Backyard? Because it's not just community associations. Sometimes it's councillors that you have to work with, or caucus members who will say, yeah, I'm all in favor of more housing, we need more housing, but then they're willing to vote against it or campaign against it if it's in their area. How do you deal with the NIMBYism, both from citizens and fellow elected officials?
Well, I think as mayor, I will tell you the first thing that I've learned, and the Premier will obviously speak for himself, but as mayor, what I've learned is the first thing you have to do is tell people what we're not talking about here, which is what we're not talking about fundamentally altering the character of neighborhoods, because people present it that way. And, you know, I would start, for example, with a lot of the major streets in Toronto where we have 2 stories, retail at grade, and then on the second floor there's apartments. And if you look at many of the great cities of the world, they have 5 or 6 or 8 or 9 stories of rental above the retail. And I'm talking about streets like the Danforth. If you look at the Danforth now, or you look at Bathurst Street, or you look at a number of other streets, there is just not the development that has taken place, notwithstanding that we've invested billions of dollars in transit many years ago. And so I think we have to sort of go through and just bring people along with us, and it's certainly something that I'm prepared to do in the coming years, because we have to. We have no choice. This is a city that is growing at 70,000 people per year. I'm so happy about that people see Toronto and Ontario as a magnet to come and pursue their lives and pursue their opportunities. They have to have a place to live, and they have to have a place to work, which means a strong economy, and it means building housing, in particular affordable rental housing and ownership. But I think a lot of it's just going to be education, what it is that we're trying to do and what we're not trying to do. We're not trying to upset stable neighborhoods. We're simply trying to say the status quo is not going to be an option for us in a city that is growing as fast as Toronto. And thank God for that growth. If this city, like a lot of counterpart cities, was declining in population, we'd be very worried about that, and from the standpoint of both the economy and the health of the city overall.
Well, we see certain regions in Ontario where there's 444 municipalities. We want to work collaboratively in there. Nothing's worse than you know, the provincial government going in there with the stick. I believe in giving more carrots, working with them, and we're going to get it done. There's a lot of opportunity out there. The municipalities you mentioned, I'll sit down with them and work with them, but we can't just say no. As the mayor said, they have 70,000 people coming in to this great city every single year. We have over 2 million new immigrants that are going to be arriving over a very short period of time, probably even more in 10 years, but roughly about 10 years. But it goes hand in hand. We're in desperate need. We have a massive labor shortage to a tune of 340,000 people. It's easy to say, yeah, let's bring more people in, which I'm all in favor of. I really want to bring more immigrants into our province. I'm going to work with the federal government. But the first question that comes up, where are they going to live? So, you know, for the folks that you mentioned, be it Ottawa or Durham or Hamilton, you know, and they have open land, I really want to work with them because you just can't say, not in my backyard. Everyone has to work together to make this a success, to allow our economy to continue to move forward as we see challenging times, and the infrastructure we're building to a tune of $158 billion. We need people to fill those jobs. So those same people that come into our country and our province, they need a place to live. So everyone's going to have to pitch in, and we're going to do it, you know, hand in hand with the municipalities, and the federal government plays a critical role in housing as well. But we'll get there. We can work together on so many other projects. I'm confident that we'll work together with all 3 levels of government and have a strong solution.
Aiden Shmandy, Queen's Park Briefing. Surprise, another question on housing. So, like, you keep saying we'll get there, but the budget predicted about 750,000 houses will be built between now and 2030, which is about 1.9 million short of what the CMHC says is needed to restore affordability in Ontario. So, like, can we expect another bill, some more stringent regulatory action along the lines of what the Housing Task Force recommended in its 55 recommendations? Like, how do we get there?
Well, again, we have built, our government has been instrumental in creating the environment for more builds than we've ever seen in 30 years, not only new builds, but also rentals. We've said that we need 1.5 million more homes over 10 years, and sure, that's probably going to escalate as well, but if we all work together, it can be done. If we cut the timelines down, as the Mayor was mentioning, it can be done. If we standardize process, use lean processes, it can be done. So I'm confident we'll make sure that happens, and it's all about working together. You can't have all the burden fall on Toronto. That's a heavy burden of 70,000 people. In other cities are saying, no, I'm not doing it, but it's okay to put the burden on Toronto. It's not fair to the mayor. It's not fair to the city council or the residents of Toronto. They'll do their fair share, I'm confident. But the folks out in Ottawa and Hamilton and Durham, we all have to work together, and everyone has to be on the same program.
Okay, so this one's for both of you. Do you think that the person standing next to you is doing enough to address the housing crisis in Ontario? What else can they be doing?
I believe Mayor Tory's done everything in his power. Do we have to improve the province and all municipalities? 100%. I always believe in continuous improvement, and there's always ways of driving efficiencies. I'll give you one example. Out in Ajax, when we built the long-term care home and over in Mississauga, isn't it amazing from the time they put the shovels in the ground, from the time people are moving in, was approximately 11 months, 6 or 7 story building, 320 units. That's cooperation. And if we can do it for long-term care there, also in Mississauga and over by 400 in Finch there, we can do it in other areas too. As long as there's the will, I'm very confident we can get it done. But there are things that we have to focus on. The task force came up with the recommendations. We need to follow that, but that's not the end. We have to continue looking for ways of streamlining and speeding things up. But I think one part of it is the land. That plays such a critical role in the cost of housing anywhere. You see the cost of housing and condos and right across the board. Well, we're going to have to utilize every postage stamp of land that we have to build rentals, affordable, attainable housing for the people of Ontario.
Hi there.
I just to answer that question. The very purpose of our meeting today when it came to the housing subject was what more we can do. It wasn't to sit back and say we're doing a great job that's good enough to meet all of these targets. We're determined to meet the targets. We have some terrific programs we have in place between and among the three governments, but we need to do more. And that's exactly what we were talking about today, but it is going to involve as well the participation of the federal government. We have some models that have worked well where all three governments have contributed. This business of putting up public land is hugely important, and I should note that the federal government, the party now in power, the Liberals, indicated in the last election they would start to put up more federal land because we've both, the city and the province have done quite a bit of that in the city of Toronto, and so I think that those are the kinds of things that we can do going forward and to do a number of the other things that the Premier's mentioned on the way through. But that's exactly why we met today on the housing file, which was because we know we need to do more because the need is there, and the need is created by success. The number of people who want to come and live here and who do live here and just can't afford to live here. So we're going to address that together. That's why we're sitting down together.
Hi there, Dustin Cook with the Globe and Mail. This question is for the both of you. I wanted to ask about crime and the recent rash of gun violence in the city. Was that discussed today? What's the plan to address this? And what do you think about the federal government's proposed handgun freeze? Is that a step in the right direction?
Well, we did discuss that, and I think it's a very serious issue. People want to live in safe communities. They don't want to be walking outside worrying if there's going to be gunshots singing over their head. We've put over $200 million directly to guns and gangs and other areas to the city. I know it's always a challenge in policing right across the country, across North America. It's a challenge. I've always said when we catch these people that are committing heinous crimes with guns and shooting up neighborhoods. We need to have tough prison terms for them. We can't have these people that commit these crimes out on the streets in 2 or 3 days. It's unacceptable. So we need to have tougher sentences. The other area, and I know the federal government, I think the world of the border agents, 90% of these guns are coming across the border from the U.S. So we have to give the supports to our frontline men and women that protect our borders. And again, when we catch someone shooting up our streets, they know there's going to be consequences, serious consequences. So that's one area, but we're going to continue to fund all municipalities, but especially Toronto. We're going to support them any way they can when it comes to guns and gangs. I'll pass it over to the Mayor.
Well, I'll just say for starters, the measures, and I think there are two that are worthy of mention, not just the handgun freeze, which I think was a step in the right direction, but also the commitment the federal government made to addressing the border. Because as the Premier said, a big number of the guns that are identified as being used in the commission of crimes in the City of Toronto are from the United States. So I think that's a step forward. We talked about the investments with the province's help that are being made in things like neighborhood policing. That is going to be a fundamental part of our strategy going forward, which is aimed at preventing crime as much as trying to deal with it after the fact. And so we're putting a substantial amount of resources into crime prevention through the neighborhood officer program and other programs like that. And then finally, there is the matter of making sure that we change some of the laws that I think are allowing some people, for example, and I've been outspoken about this and got myself in trouble in some quarters of people who criticize me, but you know, Chief Raymer or before him Chief Saunders could tell you of many instances, not just one, where people are getting out on bail, for example, over and over and over again when they're charged with firearms offenses. And that simply has to be changed. And that's going to be a cooperative effort as between the federal and provincial governments, because we have no control over those laws, to make sure that those kinds of people who clearly pose a repeated threat to public safety are kept in custody pending their trials. And so these are all things that have to be done, but I as well emphasize the continued investment in kids and families that have to be made. And the province is investing, we are investing as a city. That's part of what I call crime prevention, which is getting right at the root causes and getting at kids when they're young and providing them with positive activities and programs that can provide support for those families so that there's not the opportunity to the same extent to be lured into criminal activity by those who would lure them.
This question is for the Premier. Premier, members of the Ontario Securities Commission have resigned since the appointment of Heather Zordel as the chair. What is your response to this, and how should they view your decision to do that, even though there were concerns about her appointment?
Well, I think she's very qualified. If you take a look at her resume, I'm not going to get into the details on our personnel issues. I know the finance minister is going to appoint some new members, but she was very highly qualified if you look at her resume, and we'll move forward from there.
Hi, Premier. The 2025 deadline for the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act to make Ontario fully accessible by 2025 is fast approaching. Yes. Can you still commit to that deadline, and what are you going to do to make progress?
Well, Minister Raymond Cho, he's done a fine job over the last few years. We have to accelerate that because it's absolutely critical that we have accessibility for everyone in Ontario that needs it. And we're going to continue funding it, and we're going to move it forward as quickly as we possibly can. I know Minister Cho has been very much engaged with that. He's very passionate about that, and so all of us should be. But we'll make sure we meet those timelines, and we'll move as quickly as we possibly can.
You've promised a 5% increase to ODSP rates that hasn't come into effect yet. What would you say to someone on ODSP who can't work and who's currently considering medically assisted death?
Yeah, you know, well, first of all, when it comes to ODSP, I'm always there to help people. I've always said if someone has any sort of a disability or a challenge, physically or mentally, as a province, I will always support those people, and I will never waver from that. We're going to increase it. I know the rate of inflation's gone up. We're increasing it by 5%. That's our one of our number one priorities when we pass the budget. And when we go back into the House, we'll make sure that that moves as quickly as possible. And when that happens, they'll get their 5% increase. And for those on ODSP, if we can find employment that they can work at, I think that's another way of supporting these people. But a message to people that are healthy. If you're young, you're healthy, mentally and physically. There's plenty of employment out there in every single sector, skilled and unskilled. We need you to go out there and fill those positions. There's 340,000 positions in every sector. Please go out and apply, and that's a hand up. There's really great paying jobs right now. It's an employee's market, and you know, this is an opportunity for them to find gainful employment.
About the budget, when you presented it, I think we were in a slightly different fiscal place. There's increasing talk about the possibility of a recession. Inflation has risen since then. So with that in mind, are you planning any further tweaks to this budget when you bring it back?
No, outside of the one with the ODSP, we're going to keep the same budget. We've put a lot of money into infrastructure, again, $158 billion. And make no mistake about it, there's challenges right across the world. But we have a great workforce that's working right now, and we're going to continue pouring money into building roads and highways and schools and hospitals and long-term care homes. And those are great paying jobs. We know that skilled trades, that by 2025, 1 in 5 people will be in the skilled trades, and they're very good paying jobs. We're putting more money into training areas, working with the trade unions as well. So we're going to do everything we can to keep moving forward, keep the economy moving forward. But yeah, is there going to be challenges worldwide? Yeah, there's going to be challenges. Can we do better than the rest of the world in certain areas? I truly believe, I'm a strong believer, we have the brightest, the smartest people anywhere in the world right here in Ontario, and a lot of them reside right here in Toronto. So if we keep moving forward with the infrastructure spending and getting people in the skilled trades, I think we'll do better than the rest of the world.
And on the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine, boosters have been, I think, second boosters. We haven't heard anything from the government in a while about opening up eligibility, and people have been wondering when they can get second shots. Can you update us on when people can get those?
Yeah, we're getting that question more and more. If you can just bear with us for a week or so, 2 weeks, until we get the Minister of Health in there fully briefed. I have all the confidence in the world in the Deputy Premier and the Minister of Health. You know, Sylvia Jones, or I should say Minister Jones, has stood shoulder to shoulder with me up here, along with Minister Elliott at the time, for 2 years straight. She understands the file, but she's going to address those issues. But she has a big job ahead of her, and I couldn't ask for a brighter person than Sylvia Jones when it comes to supporting health.
Hey, good afternoon, Premier. Along the same vein, hospitals seem to be really overloaded right now. Patients are being taken care of in hallways once again. There's a nursing shortage, and there was some word that we could see some kind of a resurgence of COVID-19 with this new variant sometime in the fall. What are you doing now to prepare our hospital system so that the overloaded ERs are not under additional siege in the fall?
Yeah, thanks for that, Colin. So we've increased the beds, 3,100 beds. We have another 3,000 beds coming online. But you pointed something out, is the HHR, Health Human Resources. It's a challenge. We've hired over 5,000 nurses. We're going to hire 27,000 PSWs. We built a new medical school. We're increasing the grads and undergrads, I believe it's by 400. The biggest problem, Colin, right now, we need people. If someone could snap their fingers or wave their magical wand and give us 10,000 extra nurses, we'd do it immediately. Are we recognizing credentials? 1,000 nurses with credentials from around the world, we're doing that as well. So the people out there that may be going to college right now, you want a great career, get into the medical field, or the universities, get into the medical field, and we're in desperate need of more nurses, more docs, and we're just going to keep hiring. We're also spending $40 billion on new hospitals. We're working with Ministry of Health on technology as well. So we're putting every resource we possibly can into health and making sure that what we've learned from lessons in the past, that we apply those lessons. And I think God willing, we should be okay on the health side, but there's massive improvements right across the board that need to be done in health.
Okay, next question is about city politics, but it is for you. A city councillor was appointed in Ward 1 and then resigned over her past comments on social media. The mayor indicated that council actually took the recommendation of the outgoing councillor, which would have been Michael Ford. Premier, why would your nephew recommend someone with that background to take his place?
Well, I can't speak for Michael, but I will tell you that, the comments that I've heard, I didn't physically go online to look at them, but when I was briefed, there's no room for comments like that here in Ontario. She did the right thing. She stepped down immediately, and she's no longer there.
This will be our last reporter, guys.
Hi, Premier. I just wanted to ask you about the throne speech. You told us last week that we would have a summer session.
Yes.
When is that going to happen? Is it going to be next Monday? Is it going to be the 11th of July? Just some of the particulars about when that will happen.
So thanks for that, Robert. We are coming back. Our number one priority is to get our budget through, and it's going to be very shortly. Robert, if you can just bear with me for a week, I just want to sit down and have our first cabinet, first caucus meeting, but it's going to be very, very soon that we're going to call the House back. I just can't give you the exact date, but I will be able to get back to you over the next few days once we sit down with cabinet and caucus. I want to get back into the House as quickly as possible and get work done.
And so do you want the budget passed sort of in this short summer session, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then have a break and then come back in September? Is that what the plan is?
I think that would be pretty accurate. We want to move forward and at least get the budget set until our ministers can continue to move forward on the agenda of building Ontario.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Great to see you. And again, I want to thank Mayor Tory for all the great work he does for the people of Toronto and how well we work together. So thank you.